Bring on a little handicapper, a little somebody to help me convey my intentions and hope that we will go back to the free market capitalism that made us all so rich. And who better to bring on than the capitalist pig, Jonathan Hoenig? Jonathan, are you there?
Sean, great to be with you. Happy New Year. Look, lots to complain about at the end of 2019, but also so much to be thankful for, Sean. Despite all the problems with this country and politics and everything else, this is still the most free, the most capitalist, the most individualistic country in the world, in history. That's why I'm so just proud to be an American, proud to be functioning in this high-performance economy, and just how fortunate we truly are.
And that's what I want to talk to you about, the high-performance economy. So as we've spent a year watching the stock market increase to astronomical new records, now we could argue as to why. I believe it's more of a credit bubble than an economic boom. What do you foresee as you step back and look at the grand picture? Will we continue along this path of new records in all of the markets, all of the indices, even as some of the small ones are getting squeezed out? What do you foresee happening?
Well, Sean, I think as you said, you got to look at the big picture. And while a lot of people have wanted to attribute it the last a couple of years of a strong economy and stock market specifically to President Trump, look, this is part of what has been a 12-year recovery, an historic economic recovery, not just in the stock market, but in growth overall. We've talked about low unemployment across a number of sectors. Now, GDP, the nation's really economic growth, hasn't picked up like it has in past, but this has been part, Sean, of a decade-plus economic recovery. Does it continue? That has a lot to do with the policies that we continue, Sean. And on that, the president has been good but somewhat mixed. So many of the regulatory efforts, for example, have boosted fossil fuel production and energy. But at the same time, and as I know you've covered, some of the tariffs and trade war has boosted prices and actually lowered unemployment. So, look, there's no difference, as we always say, between Cuba and Miami. It's all about politics and policies. The more free, the more prosperous. And that's the same thing when it comes to our own economy as we head into 2020. If we go down the road of freedom, free enterprise, capitalism, the free market, you'll see incomes rise for all. But if we continue down this road of preventionism and interventionism and a controlled economy, well, it gets worse to the extent that we go down that path.
And Jonathan, my goal is to achieve that part where we are threading that needle of not only a regulatory free or a regulatory friendly economy, but one that does embrace the other freedoms that go along with it. I think if we hit that, we could eventually tackle the one thing nobody talks about anymore, and that is the debt, which I find so troubling, Jonathan. I don't like that Pollyanna populism, and I don't like the 7-day reign, but the reality is we are acquiring debt at an amazing pace. At the same time, the government is reaping record revenues. So how do we ever tackle the actual growth in our debt if we refuse to even mention it?
That's just, Sean, you talked about what are some potential warning signs moving into 2020, and you hit the nail on the head. Debt is the number one, both in terms of ourselves and our own credit card debt, which has reached historic heights. But as you said, the national debt. Look, the Republicans at what point position themselves as fiscal conservatives? I mean, a decade ago, they were talking about curtailing spending and in fact, had some success in terms of President Obama with that. We've seen just the opposite, unfortunately, with the Trump administration. And, Sean, I know you've covered on your program some of the Federal Reserve's efforts to bail out what they call the discount window, essentially doing everything they can to keep forcing short-term interest rates lower and lower. I don't know exactly how it ends. Does it end with a massive spike in inflation? Does it end like it has in Japan with 20 years of economic stagnation? We just know from history that this level of economic debt has a major negative impact on the economy. If it comes true, if the you-know-what hits the fan in 2020 or 2021, we don't know. But we know unless we change these policies of massive government spending, whether it's here in Illinois or in Washington, D.C., times are going to get tough.
And here's the thing, Jonathan. I am dead set against a Federal Reserve. I don't even like the concept of this uniformity that it has and the collectivism and debt and loans. But the reality is there is no way with a debt this large, with deficits growing, there is no way you can have an uptick in interest. You will truly bankrupt the people. I don't think the average citizen is aware just how much money goes towards merely the interest, and it's next to nothing. It's fragmented. And if it were to uptick, what do you think their overall arching plan is? Or is it what I fear it is, which is they're just making it up as they go along?
Well, they're certainly going to be printing it, Sean, and that's one of the fears certainly is that, that debt will get paid back, but they'll pay it back by turning on the printing press, pushing down the value of our dollars, and making everything that we want to buy that much more expensive, especially for people now who are at retirement or nearing retirement who are going to be likely on a fixed budget in the next couple of years. So, Sean, this doesn't end pretty however it ends. The debt crisis, it has sank lower countries such as Greece in the last a decade and a half. So we've seen how this ends. And I think you're spot on. And unless it's addressed on some serious level, we're headed for an inevitable catastrophe, whether or not interest rates rise or not. I mean, I point again, just a little history to the Japan example. We're following not unlike what Japan's path was after their economic bubble in the late 1980s. They created infrastructure projects. And Sean, you've had there what has been about, 25 to 30 years of what they've called a lost decades, periods of major economic stagnation and lower quality of life. So, we need to get back to the principles that truly made this country prosperous, not just for the so-called ultra wealthy, but for all of us. And why is someone so-called middle class considered rich on the world stage? It's because of our capitalism, because of our freedom. That's what this country needs to get back on track.
Did you ever think, Jonathan, you'd hear a government of a country in America argue against a strong dollar?
It is a little bewildering, Sean. You would hear elected officials want to advocate for the debasement of your currency, advocate for the dollars in your pocket to buy less and less and less. The fact that our dollar is so well respected and well trusted around the world, it's a major benefit for us, Sean. Part of that benefit is trade. If you ask any CEO, big or small, over the last year, what has been the number one factor causing them to hold back on investments, and it's been the trade war. So that's got to get resolved as well, not just the currency, but just the nature of this global economy, I think, if we want to keep the good economic times going.
So one of the things I like about the Trump administration is I do feel that it can learn from a mistake. I have seen some occasion where he's corrected some policy changes, policy perspectives from the beginning. And I'm hoping that the strength in the dollar is one of them, because I disagree with the idea of devaluing our dollar, whether it's through the implementation of policy or whether it's through the outright calling for the more printing by the Fed or more restriction on the Fed. If we keep playing this game with countries that have made crucial mistakes, when do they recognize a pull-up point, and what is your barometer for it? Because to me, it's that we have this massive, massive growth in B-rated credit that is on very, very unstable collateral. And if that starts to waver, what can the average person do to weather that storm? Is this the time now when we should start getting rid of our personal debt?
Well, hell yeah. I mean, Sean, I think that, look, none of us can control what the president does, what Congress does, what happens in Washington. What we can control is, I think what you're alluding to, is our own situation. So, look, whatever party you're in, this is a good time, the markets, the economy. So take this opportunity to, my gosh, get your financial house in order, pay down that debt. Think back even to a year ago, Sean, when very much looked like we were on the cusp of a recession. Those fears could come back and come back quick. So take this opportunity to not just pay down your debt and get your financial house in order, put that 3 to 6 months worth of emergency fund, living expenses to the side. And what you find, Sean, is that you're I think you're a happier person. You know that you've been responsible, taking care of your finances. You're not living beyond your means, and you're learning from your mistakes. Sean, keep in mind the Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration, they tried steel and aluminum tariffs back in the early 2000s. And they abandoned them after about a year and a half because they found what the Trump administration has found, that those efforts actually curtail hiring and push up costs. So it's not too late to change direction from the Democrats or from the Republicans as well to put us on a more free and capitalist path.
And you know what else they have in common, those administrations and the Obama administration? They all have one thing in common. They're all promoting that the citizen spend recklessly. They're all promoting that the citizen take on debt. This has been a head-scratching issue for me for 30 years. Why would a government ask its citizens to borrow more? And
and incentivize them to do so, whether it be in housing, right? We know how well that ended the housing crisis a decade ago. And Sean, as you know, now it's really attacking young people when it comes to that student debt. We've incentivized kids to take on debt at even 4.5% in studies and gender studies that really have no ultimate financial payoff. So that's another headwind that we're facing now, is a tremendous amount of student debt that's been encouraged by exactly the government doing just that.
And you know what's funny? After the collapse in 2008, the biggest push by government was to seize upon that and grab a large part of our economy. And they did it successfully through Dodd-Frank. And the one thing I laughed at is they constantly promoted disclosure of risk for all debt except one category. The only category where they have very, very little disclosure is the category you just spoke of, and that's student loan debt. Now, I'm living this as I have a freshman in college, and it's almost where they are incentivized to bury themselves with debt. And I think that we are at this unique position where the character of our nation has become such where the people almost feel it is their right to default. And, when you see 2008, when you see lawyers on television day after day to file bankruptcy and the benefits and debt stoppers and all the nonsense, I'm curious, is it the time now where we're starting to sound like our grandfathers did when we grew up? Don't spend it. Have we become those old codgers that are just sitting on the corner? I mean, I'm wondering how this ends when everyone is growing debt, when the only answer they continue to have is lower the rate again. And we're at, 2.75 right now is the Fed?
It is not, Sean, it is not old-fashioned to expect that debt that is taken on is paid back. I think that's the Depression-era mentality that allowed our grandfathers and grandparents to get through that era. What's changed now is that the morality of the country has changed. You have politicians, whether it be Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren on down, encouraging people to essentially walk away. We need to get rid of student loan debt. We need to get rid of credit card debt. We need to help with mortgage debt. So there's this diminishment, the fact that when you do take on obligation, that you are responsible for paying it back. I think there's this sense now born of the bailouts in 2008 that the government can just bail out whatever it wants. It prints the money. It has no impact. That type of short-term economic thinking is going to catch up with us sooner or later. And I think it already has, and 2020 could be the year that the straw really breaks the camel's back.
I want a Hoenig prediction before I let you go. November 3rd, who takes it, Trump or the Democrat? What do you think?
Boy, Sean, picking stocks is a lot easier than picking political candidates. But I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to think it's going to be Trump versus Buttigieg, and Trump will ultimately win.
Oh, from your mouth to God's ear. Thank you, Hoenig, for joining me. I appreciate it. CapitalistPig.com. Thank you so much. We'll be taking your calls after that. 312-642-5600.
If you're talking about it, Dan and Amy are talking about it. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Balance of Nature. Changing the world, one life at a time.
I just want to tell you that I can't believe what this has done, and I've only been taking it for, a couple of months. I don't know. I got to the point where I was very discouraged, and my energy was down, and I tell you, my wife says this stuff is wonderful. I feel so much better. My attitude is different, and my energy is good, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
This is the season that focuses on family, faith, and love. This holiday season, Balance of Nature is offering